us to share in your ministry. Help us to rejoice in the one church that you bring. Amen.
Amen.
So we're going to do tag team here. Talk a little bit about the trip Sue and I made to Yambi in July. On the Asiwasifiwe. Amen. Amen. They use that in Tanzania as a way to get your thoughts together when you're speaking. Okay? That's part of it. And also, may the Lord be with you. So, Zumbro Lutheran Church in Yambi. We've been in partnership with Yambi now for 10 years. We started in 2012 with Pastor Vern. We're in partnership with Yambi Lutheran Hospital, the Central Diocese, which is their equivalent of a synod in Tanzania. ELCT stands for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania. The Southeastern Minnesota Synod, the ELCA, and Global Health Ministries, which is based in Fridley and does a lot of medical supplies to low and middle income countries across the world, especially in Africa, but not just Africa. And our initial thing was we respond to the needs of the Yambi Hospital. And that's how this is kind of a clue to where we're going. We learned on our last trip in 2019 that we were told we needed to be more directive. So just not responding, but being more directive. That was brought home to us very deeply on this trip in July. You must be more directive with us. And it didn't just come from the hospital, it came from the bishop, it came from the town. So what you're going to hear is, as we go, a little bit more about what it means to not be passive, but mean being more directive. Now, that doesn't mean we're being directive on our part. Sue will talk about that a little more later. We're responding to them, they're telling us to be directive, all right? So, what's Yambi's hospital? They've provided Christian medical care to the people of central Tanzania. One of their main goals is to reduce maternal and fetal mortality. They do a lot of infectious disease delivery, and they provide general surgery. This is the chapel, which we go to every morning during the weekday for worship every morning at the beginning of the day. That's part of when you're there. That's part of what you do. Now, some of you have heard this talk before, or versions of this talk, but many of you haven't. I thought it would be useful just to remind you where Yambi is. Here's Tanzania, which is on the east coast of Africa on the Indian Ocean, south of Kenya, and north of Mozambique. Yambi is about right there. Pretty much the center of Montana of Tanzania. Okay, just to give you a sense of how populated it is. We fly, when we go, we fly into JRO, Kilimanjaro Airport, which is halfway between Arusha and Moshi. Here's Mount Kilimanjaro. Moshi is the gateway to climbing the mountain. Arusha is the gateway to safaris. All the national parks, major national parks, are west of Arusha. So we fly into JRO. We left here on Thursday afternoon. We didn't get to JRO until 8 o'clock Friday night because of the time difference. Because it's 24 hours travel, okay? You're really tired when you get there. And this looks close on the map, but this is almost an hour and a half drive. So by the time you get to your hotel on that first night, you're pretty tired. Bashiri, our driver, who's been a driver for us now for since the beginning, I think. And he's a very good friend. And he's been to Zumbro, by the way. Some of you may have met him. Lisa Kipp brought him here in September of 2018, I believe it was. But he picked us up at the airport. It's always wonderful when you go, and then when we go again, and if you come with us, you will be lovely greeted by Bashiri when you leave the airport. because it's a low and middle income country. The airport is packed with people waiting to serve you. So when you want to leave, you're mobbed. So there's Bashir, you're waving. We just zoom through the crowd, go straight to Bashiring. We stay one night in Arusha to get over the jet lag a little bit, and then we drive out into the countryside. When we first went in 2012, that was about an 8-hour drive. Nowadays, it's 5. And if you go the back way out, which we found, it's 4. So it's actually not as far as it used to be because of the paved roads, okay? So here's a Google Maps view of the Yambi village. This is the hospital right here, okay? We stay here, which is the guest house. You'll see a picture of that later. Here is the main parish, a church, kind of like a bishopric of this region of Tanzania, St. Wanzalea. And then, as you can see, lots of fields around. We'll come back to this map a little later. This was an airport, by the way. This still could be used as a landing strip. But when this Google picture was taken, it was pretty dry. It's pretty weedy. You'd want to have somebody go out and mow it for you before you landed there. So again, we've been, Sue and I have been to Tanzania. Sue's been to Tanzania 11 times. I've been there 10 times. Our first trip was with Luther Seminary in 27. And we fell in love with the country, so when Laverne came and wanted to understand how we might do mission, we said, well, let's talk about our partnership. The Central Diocese of the ELCT is in partnership with the Southeastern Minnesota Synod. Almost every diocese of Lutheran Church around the world is in partnership with one of the synods in the U.S. So Vern and Sue and I looked and saw there's one Lutheran hospital in the Central Diocese, and here we are at the Mayo Clinic. It's a good thing we could potentially partner with them because we're full of medical care people. They need medical care professionals. So we've done all these trips. I'm not going to read them all to you. The last trip before this year was in 2019 because of COVID. We were going to go in 2020 in April and obviously had to cancel. And it was good that we did because COVID was pretty rampant in the country. And by the way, we got it while we were there. We can tell that story later. We brought Paxlovid with us because we knew it would be good to have something in our back pocket in case we got it. So our main goal this time, because we learned in this trip in February of 2019 that there were some issues in the community and issues with the hospital. The census had gone down greatly by this time, and Sue will talk more about that. So our main goal was to inspect the hospital. And over the last couple of years of COVID, Sue and I, along with Pastor Rob and with Kathy Chatelaine and Bishop Hassanali from the diocese office, synod office here, have been doing teleconferences, Zoom conferences with Bishop Palenti, who is the new bishop of the Central Diocese. So we've been keeping in touch with them for the last couple of years. And so the goal was to go to inspect the hospital and give a report to the bishop. So I said we drove. Bishop drove us to Inklungi Village, where the hospital is, on Saturday, I think it was July 15th, and got there in the evening. Met the new hospital director, Reverend Maji. Met the new doctor in charge, Dr. Uki. We went to the guest house, which you'll see a picture in a little while, had dinner, and went to bed. We were told that worship would begin at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. So we had our first breakfast. We kind of felt like hobbits. We had our first breakfast at 8. And about 8:30, we were hearing music. The map doesn't make it clear, but it's not very far from the guest house to the hospital, to the chapel, to the church. We're hearing music, and so we always knew that when they tell us the times of things, you got to be really flexible. So as we said, okay, we better go go down there. So we walked down to the church. And some of you have been there before. This was when we walked in. So those of you who've been there, you know, this tent is not supposed to be there, usually. And there is never this many people at this hospital, or this church. Well, this region of Tanzania bought for Bishop Huminti a car. It would literally be like the Zumbro River Conference buying Bishop Hassanali a car. So there were 17 churches. They pooled their resources and they bought him a car. Well, this was the delivery and the blessing of the car. Here it is. And it was packed because there were representatives from all the churches in this sort of area who came to be part of the blessing. The church service went for, well, first we had our second breakfast because they herded us into a room over here where the bishop and his staff and all these visiting pastors were having their breakfast, so we had a second breakfast. And then the church service began. It went for 5 hours. Right? We weren't done, because we had lunch then, until about 1:30 in the afternoon. The worship services there are amazing. When you go, you know you're going to be sitting for at least 4 hours, so it didn't bother us. Even if it's in Swahili, you kind of are embraced by the many people that are there and the fervor of their worship. So many things happened in that service. We could spend the whole hour talking about that. But one of the things we did get, this was in church today in Joe Aaron's talk, is we were given a gift of sunflower oil by the bishop who's there in the middle. He had already given 4 gallons to other people, and we got our gallon. We didn't keep it because we could never have gotten it through MSP for one thing. But so we donated it to the cooks that were serving us food while we were living. And so the bishop did a lot of talking, and that's another story. But he was one of the major things in this service that we knew, and he would do asides to us because we were in the front row. He would say, "You all have to forgive each other." Talking about grace today in church, he was saying to this hospital and the people, because their hospital staff is in the church service and the village, you all have to forgive each other because there has been tension between the village and the church. And he spent his whole sermon talking about that. And it was extraordinary because he was beginning to preview what we were going to find. So I'm going to give it over to Sue. She's going to describe the next things we did.
Yeah, it was, the worship service was extraordinary, and among the other dignitaries, there was their local member of parliament who came. And, you know, if you're visiting and you're sort of esteemed as somebody special, you must give an address. So Bob and I always are, you know, we're asked to give a greeting. Lisa Kip would actually learn enough Swahili to greet the folks in Swahili. But this member of parliament, sort of building on the bishop's car and the celebration of the day, said, you know, they were going to build roads and make sure that this area of Tanzania, I like to refer to it as the North Dakota of Tanzania. It's like rural. And the bishop stood up and he said, and excuse me, Mike, but make sure you keep your promises to these people. And Bob and I are like, you could say that? As you're a pastor, you could say that stuff? It was surprising. And, you know, we're very reliant on folks sitting next to us to know enough English to whisper a translation now and then. But honestly, I thought we were getting gasoline when they gave out that gallon. You know. So you can think you understand, and then you can discover, no, you really didn't. Okay, so on this trip, it was a very short trip. We only really spent 2.5 days in the village. On Sunday after the worship service, we kind of had the afternoon to ourselves, and we went and did some bird watching. And on Monday, then we were, again, it was a real privilege. We sat down with the hospital director and the doctor in charge for 3 hours. And over the time that, the years that we have not been able to visit, we've been in touch. Jan Vedder's on our committee, the Newmans are on our committee, and we've been in correspondence and trying to assist. We have been sending them quarterly payments to assist with their purchase of pharmaceuticals and supplies like gloves, bandages, things that are kind of consumable supplies. But we had lots of questions. The model that the ELCA uses in this type of ministry is called accompaniment. Now, for me, with a career in mental health, this was not strange at all. When you're working with someone in mental health care, you are there to equip and empower them. You're not there to direct their lives, right? In mental health care, we don't give people answers. We give them information. We teach, we guide, we support. And so for me, the accompaniment model is just an extension of that. We as a church are there to equip, to guide, support, but they run the hospital. So as we go further in this talk, you'll see where things can then become kind of dicey. There's a very cultural difference too in terms of how finances are discussed. So in the United States, if Bob and I are looking into a new charity we might want to support, it's very common for the people at the charity to supply you with a financial report, right? And we can get information about how reliable and how responsible they are with their funds. In Africa, if you ask for a financial support report or information, you are insulting them, because basically you're saying, we think you're criminal and we want to see the books. So we've been in touch with the hospital for 10 years, and in the past, I see 3 visits, they've begun to give us numbers. And so over the time we were not in touch with them, we've been able to, with phone calls and that, get some numbers, but there's always numbers missing. So this 3-hour conversation was a real turning point, I think, in our relationship, with them being quite open. Dr. Oogie is the new doctor in charge, and I wish I had a photograph of him. Oh, yeah, there we go, yeah. So this is Dr. Oogie, and this is Eli Fumaji, who is the new director of the hospital. And Dr. Oogie has a head for numbers and speaks great English. And so we got more information, a better picture of how the hospital is doing. How do I switch slides here?
Just press the left arrow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So, and then one of my things when we go, I usually do kind of a quick equipment survey, where is the equipment that we've supplied, what condition is it in. We were really pleased to see that the hospital had a new blood bank refrigerator. That was not purchased by us, it was purchased by another NGO. And an autoclave purchased by Africa Smile. Africa Smile is an NGO out of Washington State. And this is maybe the most relevant. So last March, they contacted us, and the Tanzanian government had put out a mandate that all hospitals had to switch to digital records. There was no money accompanying this mandate. And they had, they were told this in November, but about January, the hospital started getting in touch with us and saying, we really need to be able to do this. So we supplied them money, and I think we had given them 4 computers a few years back, and now we supplied money for them to install an electronic medical record. And here's Dr. Oogie, this is Dr. Nyenje in the outpatient department. Unfortunately, when they go to digital records, they only have 1 computer in the outpatient department, and they need probably 4, right? If you can imagine, those of you who are physicians or in healthcare, having to walk down the hall every time you want to find out something about your patient or enter something in the medical record. We were really pleased to see I think under the new director and Dr. Oogie, the hospital was cleaner and better organized than it's ever been. Okay, and this, when we would go in the past, the Fundi yard, the Fundi is sort of the mechanic and repair guy, but there was piles of dead wood and, you know, the kinds of stuff that repair guys like to have around, right? But it was just heaped, right, Rich? Yeah. This picture I took, so this is the new wing, and Zumbro helped to furnish it and tile the floors. But as you can see, it's a hospital, and those mattresses were new 6 years ago. But it's a hospital, and for 6 years, none of the mattresses have been replaced. It's an ongoing issue. One of my pet projects has been trying to get the staff to maintain maintenance logs on the equipment, because we've learned there's only one Swahili word for, like, it's not working. And so that translates to broken. And broken can mean it's not plugged in, we don't have an adapter, the fuse blew, I don't know how to run it. So having a maintenance log is my attempt to try and, you know, make sure that they're tracking what's working and not working. On our, after our long discussion and then detailed tour of the hospital, on Tuesday morning, we knew we would be meeting with the bishop and his staff again to talk about the hospital. Bishop Halenti is really concerned about Iambi. This is a change from the prior bishopric, where the prior bishop actually was hoping the hospital would generate income for him. It's like, you know, it's a hospital in one of the poorest areas of one of the poorest countries in the world. It is not going to bring a profit, okay? And this bishop understands that. Here is Bishop Halenti. This is Joshua, hospital administrator, accountant type, Nehemiah Shadrach. Nehemiah Sheila, thank you. Over here, this is Dr. Ugi. Eli Fumaji is a pastor. He's the director of the hospital. Lelani is one of my friends there. She's the pharmacist. So we had meeting, and we met for about 4 hours. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Bob and I are in the middle. Okay. And so when we walked into the guest house, they had this meeting at the guest house. And so we sat on the ends because the bishop is the most ranking person in the room. And he said, no, you're running the meeting. Okay. But this was a big change for them. For the first time, they wanted us to sit down and explain what we were seeing, so I'm an inveterate note taker, and I had started listing some things that were positive because I'm anticipating the report I'm going to write for Zumbro. So we did have sort of a skeleton outline of what we were going to talk about. Dr. Ugi, probably one of the most knowledgeable people that they've had as a head doctor in a long time. They have hired an HR director. Unfortunately, the previous head of the hospital was not just sort of not good at HR, he was positively bad. And that added to some of the suspicion that the local folks have about the hospital. I mean, if you can imagine, the income in Tanzania is still roughly $2 to $3 a day. Okay, so there's this. The local people are barely scraping by, and here's this hospital getting all this money from America, and what's happening to it? And you know, there's a lot of suspicion, and And then in the past, the hospital has not paid its debts. They've had a couple of years where they weren't able to keep up with salary. So the new HR director is helping a lot. Also the bishop, when he came in, he immediately launched a fundraising effort to try to pay down the debt. One of the numbers we still have not gotten is how much debt does the hospital have? So hopefully we'll get that. We were told that since 2020 they've been able to maintain payroll on time. One of the big financial mistakes that the hospital made several years ago was to launch this nursing school, and they were paying the salaries of these nurses. It drove me nuts because they had these professors on salary for a year before the nursing school opened. And these ladies would just kind of, when we were there, they just sort of walked around. Again, it's a difference in culture, right? In the United States, we're used to the idea that if there's work to be done and you aren't busy, pitch in. I'm thinking, here are these nursing professors, and here's a hospital. It's like, but that's not how it's done. If it's not your job, you don't do it. Anyway, so they've moved the nursing school off the hospital budget. Dr. Ugi, they've been bringing in subspecialists, and Dr. Ugi sponsored this ophthalmology clinic in the spring. They had an ophthalmologist come in, and the person brought their own equipment. They were able to conduct 11 cataract surgeries in a day. That's 11 people who can see, right? Better equipment. One of the advantages the hospital has because of your generosity is that they're better equipped than other hospitals in the area. Clean, better organized, and another advantage is that because every time we would go, we would call on the central diocese, and Bishop Palenti was on the administrative staff for a long time in the central diocese before becoming a bishop. So we know the guy, and he knows us. Among the challenges, one that I didn't list here, but the hospital has had a change in leadership almost every year. And you know how devastating that is for a large organization. Hospital total staff is about 100, 120, depending on, it fluctuates a little bit. So there's been some accumulated problems. The community relations, as I said, it's not good. About 14% of their insurance claims are rejected at this point. In the U.S., a well-run health organization, that should be less than 5%. One of the differences is here if there's an error, and again, this is all computerized, right? So the error might be as simple as submitting a claim under Susan Jenkins, MD, as opposed to Dr. Susan Jenkins, and the computer will reject one. But over there, if their computer rejects it, it's dead. There's no resubmission. Discrepancy, as we've been supplying funds on a quarterly basis, about $3,000 a quarter for pharmacy and consumable supplies. Our committee, Bob Hoel and Ann Leland, have been looking over those lists and going, these should vary from season to season, depending on what's going on, right? There's a difference in infectious diseases, there's a difference in the kinds of surgical care you might be giving, and the list is the same every time. And then we were very disappointed. A week after we had visited the hospital, we got notice that the x-ray machine, which again was purchased with your generosity, is broken again. We have a technician who's not affiliated with the hospital. We pay him to drive from Moshi to the hospital, and he sent us a picture of a circuit board with smoke on it. It's like, yeah, that's broken. But again, so with the accompaniment model, we've been very judicious about the kinds of questions we've asked, the kinds of information we've demanded from them, in response to this latest challenge, well, Bob, do you want to take it from there?
So, yeah, what you saw on these two slides is basically what we told the bishop, his staff, and the hospital. They were all in the guest house with us. So we basically, what we just told you, we told them, okay? The land, I can't spend a lot of time on this, but they own lots of land. Remember the farm project? This is the farm. The hospital owns all of this land. They may own all the land out here, I'm not sure. They own land of the hospital, they own this land, and they own land going this way. All right?
And all of these, this
all-
little straight row was originally built as housing for hospital staff.
And off the map is a lovely place. We went there with the hospital director. We called it Eden. It was like a golf course that they own. Big trees. Unbelievable. That's where they're growing sugarcane now because it's in a little swampy area. So the use of the land is a problem.
Well, an opportunity.
Or an opportunity, yeah. So we actually told you this a few years ago, and the draft plan hasn't changed. We want to improve the patient experience, but they have to improve the community relations. There's a bit of this going on between the hospital and the community, and we heard it loud and clear from representatives of the community who came to the guest house. We worked almost as hard there as we do when we were here, because people came to visit us after dark, privately, to tell us their concerns. That's how much cred we have in the community now, having been there all these years. So they've got to work on communications, they've got to work on community relations, they've got to work on hospital revenues. They need to build more of these specialty services, and they need to figure out how to best use their land. And this is not a Zumbro thing, this is not a Bob and Sue Jenkins thing. This is a thing of the Young Lutheran Hospital, the Central Diocese, the Southeastern Minnesota Synod, Global Health Ministries, Zumbro Lutheran Church, especially our committee, all right? So we finished. Why we went in July is I had a meeting in Nairobi. So we then drove from the village to Nairobi, to Arusha and then Nairobi. And we had plenty of time to think about what we were going to say in our report. And we got COVID. We were sitting in a room, isolating ourselves in Nairobi, and we basically decided this is a bishop-to-bishop problem. So the minute we got, not problem, more of an opportunity, if you will, since we got back, we arranged to have a meeting with Bishop Hassanali and Kathy Chatelain, who is the Director of Global Missions in our Synod, and basically then told them what we just told you. And Bishop Hassanali said to us, well, we recommended that she send a letter to the bishop, and from her to Bishop Valenti. And so it basically outlined what I just told you, the main points being they need to have a memorandum of understanding that no one will touch this x-ray machine or any other equipment unless they're licensed technical people. That's why the machines are busted, is because they're being plugged in the wrong outlet and they burn them out. You don't do that with a $30,000 machine.
They have, or their hospital mechanic attempts to fix them.
Right.
And we've gone over and over that. Now, a fundy is not a technician. You need a technician on the sophisticated equipment.
So in our meeting with the staff, we said, you cannot let Makala touch the instruments. And they said, we're never going to let Makala touch the instruments. And I raised my hand and said, touchdown, literally in front of them all. And then we come back, and a week later, Makala had touched the instrument. So they gotta make this legal. They need audits. They need an audit of the land, they need audits of the finances, and they need audits of the pharmacy. And that has to be done independent of the central diocese. That has to be done by some other entity, probably maybe somebody from an area away from the hospital. And then encourage some specialties. So,
if you remember, a year ago we had a large fundraiser and you were very generous. Our goals at that time, one was an anesthesia machine for the hospital. Another was the pharmaceutical supplies to be able to do that for another year. And then electronic medical record. So we have given them funds for an electronic medical record. There's still a need. In my survey, I think they need about 7 more terminals in order to really have a functioning electronic medical record without having people having to walk across the campus to input information. The anesthesia machine, we said we can't in good conscience do that for you at this time. It's going to be between a $45,000 and $60,000 purchase. And given the difficulty they've had with maintaining the x-ray machine, we need some of this other stuff straightened out first, okay? But when Dr. Oogie met with us, he said, you know, when we started, this was the hospital in the area. At this point, with better roads, and then the government has built a hospital. This is part of why Yambi has been plunged about 5 years ago into a serious financial crisis. Because the government, prior to that time, was funding about half of their budget. And then said, you know what? We're not going to fund these church hospitals anymore. We're going to build our own. So they have done that. Now the local people are, you know, as I said, transportation's better. They have choices in healthcare. Hooray! But they know if they go to the government hospital, it's free. They have to pay a little bit if they go to Yambi. They also know Yambi has much better equipment. The government hospital is better staffed. Okay, in our original sort of contract with the hospital about what Zumbro would do, we were pointed about, we will not fund your staff. And we emphasize that again on this trip because you all are generous, but we're not in a position to say we're going to be here forever, right? So we've been happy to supply equipment, we've been happy to supply expertise, but we sort of drew a boundary around you guys have to staff the place.
So we met with Bishop Hassanali soon after we got back, and she asked us, and through us, questions to the hospital, and those are the 2 questions up here.
Maybe explain the change of direction.
So how would the change in the hospital's direction further the mission of the gospel? That change in the direction would be providing different services that can be provided by the hospitals in the region, like ophthalmology, like like gynecology, like dentistry, like orthopedics. They could build themselves a niche, but will that actually help people in the region? And I think the answer to that question, which we told her, was yes. But she also put that into her letter to Bishop Lindsay. All right, so she was being very direct with him. But then the other question was, does the hospital have the leadership it needs to oversee this change in direction? And as Sue said, they've had changes in leadership every year. There's not a stable leadership. So one of the things that Bishop Lindsay needs to do, if he wants to maintain the hospital, is he has to figure out a way, and his staff, how to maintain stable leadership of the hospital. Bishop Hassanali sent that letter about 6 weeks ago. We still haven't heard a response. I can say we have spies on the ground. In the person of Bashiri, as well as Joram, who is the technical person, and a very trusted individual in the village, who would be like, he's the son of the revered bishop that was there in the 80s. And he's the one who keeps giving us input about the community. And he and Bashiri have been talking, and apparently on Friday, they fixed the x-ray machine. And we told them we're not going to pay for this. So they got a loan, and they got the machine fixed. They took parts up to Nairobi and got it fixed. So, knock on wood, that's good. That's good news. So again, we're waiting for the more official response from Bishop Valenti. We'll see. You know, God will do what God will do, right? This is something that we have to release ourselves, have faith that the right thing will happen through faith, right? And we're just the human vehicles of this, the main vehicle person being Bishop Valenti and his staff. So we have a couple other pictures, but we thought at this point we just stop because we're pretty close to the end of our time. Questions?
Is the electric grid any more stable than it was 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got triple phase power. It comes right down the dirt road that you've been on. You drive right by it. But the connection from that into the hospital is dicey. And that's why they burned the machine out this most recent time.
Yeah, they had removed the surge protector that Joram, our independent technician, had placed. And so that's kind of why we were not willing to pay for the repair on the machine this time, until we had some signs from them that they were going to guarantee it wasn't just going to go down again.
Mike?
I'm surprised at the suggestion that you guys are bringing forth is specialization at this hospital. It seems that specialization would have additional costs and additional sophistication and implementation to do that. And is that, so what's your argument for specialization?
So in looking at the hospital specializing, for example, in ophthalmology, that is a service that people are willing to pay for. Okay, even, if you can make people see in a day, cataract surgery. Now, doing cataract surgery does require very expensive equipment, but in Africa, the model is that an ophthalmologic surgeon owns it and brings it. And so for a while, the hospital would be able to function. What makes sense to me is you don't need to do a lot of anesthesia. There's not a lot of hospital care associated with dentistry and ophthalmology. But again, we're waiting for the bishop to kind of make up his mind on this. We've gotten little bits of information that things are moving over there, but we're not, we're waiting to hear from the bishop's office a resounding, yes, this is what we're gonna do. Sonia, you had a question?
I'm just curious about what's your perception, having been there not a number of times, about the quality of nursing care, and then also if some of these services are expanded, is there enough nursing personnel available to hire?
They have trouble hiring really qualified nurses, and that's where the local people know the government hospital is better staffed because the government pays the salaries. Here they have some professionals who are paid by the government, but they don't have enough nurses, and they have to generate enough fees to be able to pay a salary. Julie Newman and Ann Leland are all over the nursing when they're there and really working closely with people.
Yeah, and it's amazing how informed people are. So one of the things the hospital did to cut costs was they put nurses' aides on the night shift. And the town knew.
And they don't like it.
And they don't like it. All right, they want LPNs and RNs on the night shift. So what's astounding is I think people are really well informed now. It may be these cell phone thingies. And it's a small town, and everybody talks to everybody. Okay, it's 2,000 people, and they all know what's going on. And a lot of the people in the village work at the hospital, right? So you can see.
So that's part of what you're talking about is that community relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Dan.
I have a question about the land fund. What are they using it for now, and can they help improve community relations?
That's a great question. Well, what they're doing now actually improves community relations. So the land that was used to do our farm project, Zumbro's farm project, they have now leased at about 5 shillings an acre to their employees. That's about $1. All right? $2. And so everybody who's an employee is using that land. And it's good. So I wouldn't try to do something or suggest that the audit say they have to charge the going rate for land in Tanzania. It's still way less than here, but it's still, high for them. This year, by the way, it's great to go in July because it's lovely. You remember it's hot and humid here. It's dry and lovely. 80 in the daytime, 50 at night. Sun's always out. It's on the equator. It's like lovely.
They
And
gave me faux fur zebra wrap because they were afraid I was cold because it got down to 65.
and it's harvest season. So the reason why they were able to buy the Bishop Akar is that the crop was phenomenal in that region. They were exporting corn from the Nkungi village to Kenya. There were trucks everywhere. Everybody was flush with money, either money itself or corn in place of money. And all around there were these big fields of corn cobs and bags. This is what the bags are what gets put on the trucks. We walked around one evening and there were 3 Maasai people begging in the village for corn.
Because they knew the village had food.
So they had walked 300 miles to beg for corn. We told that to Bishop Valenti and he said, Bob, that cuts both ways. It says a lot about how much we've been blessed, but our people don't treat the Maasai very well. It's like, what do we do with our homeless in the community, right? Things are not very different there. Well, other questions?
So, you started out saying they were urging you to be more directive.
Yeah.
Who is they? And do you have other thoughts? I'm assuming that one of the things you're come to with this is the move towards specialization. Are there other than more directive?
The bishop for one thing. So when we got to that meeting,
Their bishop.
Bishop Valenti, we got to that meeting, and I left space for the bishop because he's always in the center. He said, no, Bob, you are running the meeting. You tell us what we need to do. At one point during the meeting, I ended up doing most of the talking. I don't know why. You did a lot, but I ended up. It's a sex thing, by the way, just so you know. At one point in the meeting, I said to the room, I'm going to start asking you questions, because they were dead silent. Because you're not asking questions and responding. And the bishop elbows me and says, Bob, we don't do that here. You tell us what we need to do. All right? And then Godfrey Gunda, who is this lovely 40-something man, who is the son of the revered bishop in the region from many years ago, he's our main connection to the community. He came to us one night and said, you guys need to use your power. You have agency and power. And then we also have Bashiri, who is connected to the community. And he would go out at night and watch soccer games in the village with his buddies. They're not his buddies. He lives in Arusha, but he's been to the hospital so much he has friends there. So he talks to them and he tells us what he hears. And then we had an evening meeting with the director of palliative care, Martine, who is an independent person but is based at the hospital. Our Savior's Lutheran Church supports her program. So she's kind of an independent agent. She came by, had dinner with us, and we talked, and she told us the same thing. We were getting this message loud and clear, and it took us 4 years to hear it. It's very hard to be that in the accompaniment model, and if Sue can maybe describe that challenge.
Well, so and in our conversations with Bishop Hassanali and with the careful input of the folks on our Tanzania committee, what we are directing them to do is a financial audit, independent financial audit, because I think that would go a long way to clearing up the misunderstandings with the community about where's the money going. We advise them to engage a consultant, find out how much land the hospital owns and what you can do with it. There may be a huge opportunity there for at least helping to finance the hospital. And then we asked them to also do an audit of the pharmaceuticals. In the past, when I've been with Mulaney, and we supplied her with a computer terminal, and we just set up the kind of simplest spreadsheet of, this came in, this goes out, and she's been faithfully using that ever since. So she has years of data that should make an audit of pharmaceuticals and supplies very simple. We heard rumors in the village that one of the hospital administrators had opened his own drugstore. And we mentioned in the letter that Bishop Hassanelli sent that we thought that was a conflict of interest and would suggest that that be looked into. Bob showed you the scene in the market. So thank goodness they give us cooks, because we don't know where to buy the food, right? But as we walked around, they had okra. And Bob's relatives in Southern Illinois sold him on okra. I'm not as sold. But that's why the lady is smiling, because Bob was so thrilled to find fresh okra. And what was the last slide there?
It's just so lovely there.
Yeah.
And peaceful. And you sit there and outside the guest house in the evening, because,
in July there's no bugs.
There's no bugs. The church is only a half-mile away, and the choir is practicing. There's a soccer field about 200 yards south of there. There are kids and the young adults are playing soccer. There's a grade school on the way to the St. Lawrence. The kids are playing. It's all this lovely noise. The sun is setting. July is a great time to go.
When did you get COVID?
We don't really know. We think we were symptomatic on the drive up to Nairobi. We didn't test until a couple of days later, which is probably an oversight.
I lost count of how many people hugged us at the church service.
I don't want to pick on Mike again. So you would think this little outdoor living, there wouldn't be a lot of COVID. But their personal space is extremely close to you, even outdoors. All right? So we were pretty sure we were going to get it. Okay? Tanzania was a COVID-denying country. Their president wouldn't release information and said, we will not vaccinate, we will not mask. He got it and died. The new president is more of a believer, and most of the staff has been vaccinated, but you don't really know.
So we will be, we should stop. We're over time, but the committee is really going to keep you people informed as we learn more. We have a committee who is really dedicated and very, very thoughtful, and one of our high priorities is to use the money that you've given responsibly. And Bob and I will hang out if you've got other questions. Any of you who are at all kind of like, gee, that would be interesting to get in on, just let us know and we'll put you on the list. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. One,